friends. Welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I am East Forest, coming to you from the undisclosed remote location. But I am overjoyed this week because this week on March 17th, we get to release the Burren album in full. That is the collaborative album that I did with Peter Broderick. We're going to talk all about the magic. It was such a magical experience, all these synchronicities and happenings that happened, especially when, with hindsight, to tell you all about. And what's special about this podcast this week is that Peter came over to record the record, or mix the record, sorry. We recorded it in Ireland, out near where he lives, and then he came back to the States, we did it in April, he came back in December to mix it, and we did that live stream. And right after we finished mixing and we uploaded it to the mastering engineer, we hit record and did this podcast together to kind of debrief, the whole process, because we wanted to do that when it was really fresh. So I'm glad we did it right then. And so it's going to be fresh for you. But I'll talk a lot about the record and why I'm so happy about it and why I feel like it's so special, and I'm eager to share it with you in this episode. But it does come out this Friday. It's on St. Patrick's Day, which is so cool. It seems like the ultimate alignment, Friday, March 17th. So if you've already heard the first two singles, you're going to love this 12-song album. It is diverse and magical and acoustic. We love how it sounds, and it's just a really, I love when collaborations happen like this and something comes out that's just as it should be, like beyond what I could do on my own, and a real perfect merging of the two of our worlds and our interests and our just the music that we like to make. I felt inspired by him, and I'm hoping he was inspired by whatever I brought to the table. And this album Burren is here for you. We recorded at a place called The Burren. It's an actual place in the west of Ireland, but we'll get into that in this episode. And thank you so much for sharing the record and for listening to the record. I think it's the kind of record that gives you the most gifts when you listen to it with your attention and deeply, because it has a lot of nuance and subtlety, and you'll find that the full experience of it is done, not when it's maybe like you're driving somewhere and it's playing. If you want to really get introduced to it, give yourself to it, and I think it will give it right back to you. I do want to say thank you to everyone on our council. The council is on Patreon, patreon.com/eastforest. It's a way to support this podcast. I want to say thanks to Mike and Michael. Those are two different people who signed up recently to be part of the council. I shared some tracks from this album in advance over there as a way of, doing something special just for everyone on the council. And we do a monthly Zoom council for certain folks who want to support at that tier. But check it out. East Forest Council's on patreon.com/eastforest. Rod and I just went to South by Southwest. I am making my way home. It was nice and warm down there, and we did a wonderful panel that was hosted by Numinous on music and medicine and its music in a psychedelic landscape. Thanks to everyone who came to that panel. It was a full room. I'm sorry that we couldn't fit everybody in there, but I want to thank Charlotte and Reed, who are also on the panel. It was pretty fun, and sometimes those things can be difficult, to make feel cohesive or even interesting, and this one felt like we actually got into some relevant conversations about the role of music in the current landscape that we're experiencing. So I think that audio from that talk will be up via South by Southwest in a few days or something, but we'll keep you updated on that. But for now, what we have to look forward to is this Friday, March 17th, 2023, when we get to hear the full 12-song album Burren. And right now, let's dive into this wonderful conversation with our dear friend, Peter Broderick. Boom, we just uploaded the finished record. We have now, this is in the past.
Yes.
Well, it's in the present right now.
Yeah.
We just finished the record and uploaded it to be mastered. How does it feel?
I'm elated. I feel great.
Yeah.
You know that thing with making records, like by the time you've turned everything in, you've kind of usually had all your best creative thrills long ago.
Is that so?
I
Don't
don't know.
tell that to your. Sounds like the thing you're not supposed to say to your partner or your wife.
Right. Well, I don't know. Do you not agree with that?
Well, making a record is, yeah, it's in stages, and the actual creative birth of it is one highly exciting part. Yes,
Yeah.
that's like the virgin territory, and then it can get
Yeah.
quite meticulous
Right.
and thoughtful.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, the fire can be gone in a different way.
Right. So you know, it feels great to have we just uploaded all the final mixes and we're sending them off to the mastering engineer to put his final touches on it. And then
Yeah,
it'll be done.
yeah. No, it feels really good. So for folks that know or don't know, we'll tell a little bit about, because the story of how this was recorded, I think we've talked a little bit about it in the past, but it kind of is important and interesting because it's the whole record to me is it's happening, less
Yeah.
than like a concept. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It just kind of unfolded.
Very much so.
Yeah. How far back do you want to go?
I say we just tell the story, but and in doing so, we can talk about any specific songs or anything else. I mean, you have such an eclectic story yourself that you've been on the podcast a few times. But
Yeah, a couple times, but it's interesting because this is the first time since we've met in person.
that's right.
The other two times I was on your show, we hadn't actually met yet.
That's right. Right. Yeah, the first time we actually met in person was in Ireland when I showed up last April in 2022 to record
Yep.
together.
Yep.
And I believe your only concession, and I love this one too, is just don't plan anything. Let's not prepare anything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. We agreed to meet up, find a mutual space to go to, and not have any preconceived ideas, and just see if we could work together.
Shout out to the Beekeepers. Is that the name of the place?
That's the name of the place, County Clare, Ireland. Yeah, the
Yeah.
beekeepers.
So imagine Western Ireland. We could see the ocean in the distance, lots and lots of classic green, sloping lowlands with this rocky mountain, low mountains behind us called the Burren.
The Burren, very unique landscape.
Yeah.
It's all hills of gray stone that when the sun hits them, they're often kind of shimmering, kind of
Yeah.
silvery.
Strange rock. It was like pumicey and had lots of little like craters and divots. So you'd be kind of careful, and moss, patches
Yeah.
of moss on it.
Yeah, you could easily slip down one of these cracks.
Yeah.
And like a lot of them, you can't see how deep they even go.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very unique landscape, really, really beautiful, filled with lore.
Well, you live effectively across the bay from it, which
Yes.
is about an hour's drive. But
Yeah.
I mean, I remember you kind of pointing way across the bay, and that was where you live.
Exactly, yeah. Galway Bay. On one side of the bay, you've got County Galway. On the other side, you've got County Clare, where the Burren is. And I've been living, the last 5-6 years over in Galway, and we were in Clare.
We were in Clare. So yeah, we showed up at this house, and it's a beautiful little house. It's kind of a stone on the bottom outside, lots of old wood, and lots of windows, and kind of farm type land around us. A very small area. Right?
Yeah. For people who would be familiar with that area, it's right next to a fairly major landmark and tourist attraction called the Alwee Cave.
Yes.
Which was closed while we were there, which was kind of a bonus, really, because it meant there was no tourists
Not many
running
people
around the
around.
area. There was
Yeah.
nobody around. Yeah.
So we're here in the house. It's a beautiful house, and I do remember that I had arrived and I was extremely burnt out, and Rada was with me, and we had just driven from Dublin there we rented a car. It turned out to be a Tesla, which sounds cool, But we immediately realized there's really not many places to charge a Tesla
In rural
outside
Ireland?
Dublin. So immediately it's like, what are we going to do? How are we going to, oh my God, so it's that kind of stuff. And we're really tired. My luggage got lost and just burnt. And then you drive on the other side of the road and I was freaking out because and the roads are
You
really,
were the passenger, were you?
Yeah, they're really, I kept thinking I was going to die for
The
hours
roads are
and hours.
tiny. There's no shoulder.
It's dark. It's raining.
Yeah. Yeah.
I freaked. I gotta be honest. I was definitely stressed out. And she was, of course, like, "Quit telling me how to drive." And I'm like, "You're gonna throw it up. You're gonna throw it up." So we show up, and I'm a mess. And I'm like, "Nice to meet you."
You definitely seemed a little out of it. I could tell you'd just been through a bit of something. I was like, all right, just give these folks some space. Let them settle in a bit.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'd been there out foraging before you got there, having a great time. Settling into the place.
How long had you been there?
I think I'd been there for at least 2 or 3 hours or something.
Okay.
The other thing I thought worth mentioning was that I was told, because to me, this house we rented, it doesn't look like your traditional Irish house. You know, Irish houses, they're usually pretty basic looking houses made of stone. But this house, and I was told when I got there, it was built by a community of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh.
Several years prior, which is something I sort of vaguely referenced in one of the lines of one of the songs. Did? Yeah, maybe that's funny. You never.
I didn't pick
I guess
up on
I never
that.
said that out loud. The second song, the Burren, the first line is "the house of a certain God."
Oh, I just wondered what that was referring to.
Yeah, and it's sort of talking about a house being built by people that have a very particular idea of what God is, and a very restricted sort of idea, I guess, coming from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, if Jehovah's Witnesses, this is what I was told, if they build a house, they'll get a Jehovah's Witness architect to design it, and the whole sort of community will come together to build the place. And that's why this house, actually, in my view, it's a lot nicer than a lot of houses I've been in.
It was nice.
I was surprised at how nicely it was built, and it has a lot of wood, which is pretty uncommon in Ireland to have wood as one of the major building materials because it's so damp and moist there. And,
it was quite damp.
Yeah.
Well, it was a beautiful house, but we arrived at night, so we couldn't really see what was going on. And I remember feeling like we needed to set up our equipment, our instruments, and whatever we had, just because, I wasn't quite sure what was there. And I just had this attitude in my mind, like, I don't want to lose any time because I know we've only got like a week.
Yeah.
And so
you wanted to get to
I forced
down to business.
us to like set everything up, which was like just finding out what they had. They had a little bit of equipment there, and then what we had, and there were like electrical issues, and we set it all up, and I was like, well, let's like line check just to make sure, do a quick recording, make sure it's just working.
Yeah.
And I think we had the piano. We had a little upright piano, Schimmel piano.
Yep.
And you had a little station with some looping pedals, your violin, and some percussion, and a microphone. And we put the headphones on and hit record, and you started making this pad with the violin, like a background that was very ethereal, and it immediately sent me into a very special place. And I just started playing some piano, and we recorded a song that was one take. It became the first song on the record, and I remember looking at you, and it just blew me away that there was no communication beforehand, and I just felt like during it I was in total sync to what you were intending to do and where we were going and the spirit of it and how to play and what not to play. Yeah. It just was all just there.
Yeah, and I don't know for people who might not be musicians, I don't know how relatable that is, but like I think for me personally, there's sometimes collaborating where it clicks right away and sometimes where it doesn't. And this was one of those moments where it really felt like it just fell together, almost like it didn't even have anything to do with you and me. It was like something else was happening there, and just we were just the vessels for the thing to come through.
And after the whole week went by, now it's easier to see that. It feels like the landscape itself, the Burren, very much had a large part to do with that happening.
Well, we had the intention of like
we put in the work.
We put in the work, but we also we were. I mean, the place we were in, it had a beautiful sunroom with lots of windows, so you couldn't help but notice the landscape
and hear it.
The birds coming in. It's springtime, but it was. I don't know if we really had much of a choice, but we did notice that and make the intention of, okay, let's let this place speak through the music if we can.
And that's why, I mean, the record, it's hard to know in the future, is probably called Burren. It will be something when this is out, but regardless, it's a lot about that place.
Very much so, yeah.
We also ended up using a few field recordings. I had these binaural microphones that you put in your ears.
Right.
And I recorded a few different versions of the birds outside because they were so present and loud. And frankly, they come through various microphones without us. We had no control over that.
Yeah.
I mean, they come through the piano mics at times, the guitar mic, and
there was no avoiding getting them in the recording.
No.
But that's a beautiful memory of mine. Is after that first night, and we had, it was a bit. Everyone's arriving. We're all just trying to get on the same page. We played that music, and then we kind of like settled.
It totally was
in.
medicine for me.
Yeah.
Then I was like, everything was just felt better.
Yeah, and then
I was blown away. I was like, oh my God.
It's like, okay, yeah, this is going to be fine. Great. It like sets you up with tons of excitement for the week to come. But then we woke up the next morning, and I woke up and I went upstairs and looked out the window, and you were already outside walking around recording the birds.
Yeah.
So I picked up the guitar and I started just playing around and ended up writing a thing that became the second song on the album.
The Burren. And so the process sometimes was just purely improvisational like that. Like put up the mics, have a general like, you play this, I'll play this other instrument.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
And it was like that. And then sometimes a bit more intentional where like you're basically fiddling on the guitar over coffee.
Yeah.
And just kind of writing a little song.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that sounds really beautiful. We also hadn't even established purposely, like, this is how we'll do this.
No.
Like, will we write together? Will you write and then I go write? Or will we only improvise? And you took the lead, and I appreciated sort of like every time a song finished, you would say something like, okay, I feel like we need one that's improvisational again, or I feel like we need a composed one that's just stripped back. And we would just go, each song would inform, we did about 2 a day, what should happen next.
Yeah, I guess that's just the nature of how I think about things.
But we were building an album in real time, not thinking, I'm sure we both thought, hey, we'll record some songs with the best ones. Maybe we'll put them on a record. Maybe if we have enough for a record.
There was no real agenda. It
doesn't have to be a record.
Yeah, exactly.
But how it ended up is crazy.
But I think, I think we both started to feel after the first couple days, it started to become apparent, okay, we're actually writing an album in real time. So the first thing we wrote is the first track, and the second thing we wrote is the second track. And it seemed like it was
even
happening
then,
that
there was
way.
Like maybe. It's like, could that ever happen? We're like, is that even possible?
But that's the thing. We were not attached to that idea.
We're like, if it wants to be, so be it.
Yeah, exactly. So I started to get that idea in my mind, but I was trying not to attach to it because I wanted to leave space for it to become whatever made
it wanted
sense.
to be. And truthfully, to be at the end like, hey, these 2 songs shouldn't be on it. And be honest about that.
Yeah.
Not be like stuck to a concept.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I thought we served the record well in that sense and the songs. But look, it's crazy. I've never done anything like this where a record is everything that was recorded in the order it was recorded in 1 week.
Yeah, we got 12 tracks in 1 week, written and recorded. It was a real outpouring flow of creativity for me, and I think
me too.
For you as well.
Oh yeah.
We just dove in, and we were doing that for a week, and everything we did, we still like, which is it's nice. Yeah.
So the Burren, I really like that song. You definitely took the lead on it, and it was just beautiful. And I remember the way the long extended end happened was maybe you were playing piano on the track, and
Yeah.
there was a drone, and I just let it kept rolling in your headphones. You kept playing, and I did a motion like keep going.
Yeah.
And there was another 5 minutes of this like chordal shifts, and that became this extended ambient ending,
Right.
which was one of my favorite things about it. And in some ways that helps. The record goes in these different directions stylistically. So something like that, it's sort of this ambient folk sweet little tune, and then it goes into a slight experimental direction. I think it sets you up to say, hey, don't have too many expectations because this record will go places.
Yeah. Yeah. And that just unfolded really naturally. I think, like you said, we kind of had a drone in the background of the song, and I was adding piano to what was already there, the guitar and the vocals. But when the song finished, you just kept it rolling, and I just kept playing.
Because your violin's making a drone. I love playing over drones. I don't know about you.
I do too.
But they're so like emotional.
I think there were times where, in the moment we're just playing and just being free. But there were times where we thought, well, is this, at least I started to worry, is this too indulgent to like just go on playing for 4 minutes after the song is over?
Yeah.
But we just started to love the way it all took
Well,
shape.
we were indulging in the process.
I suppose we
and
were.
I'm sure, do you have that feeling when you're making your own records? Like, don't edit, just record it and figure it out later in a way.
Yeah.
That was my attitude at the time. I was like, I don't know, but let's just play it and we can always cut it.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's a great way to work. Just keep the flow open as you're creating, and then sort of, I guess I just sort of imagined we would trim down more than we actually did.
I did too.
But we ended up leaving most, if not all, of the stuff in there.
Just about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, very minor cuts. And again, we weren't saying it had to be one way or the other. It just, I think as you have time with it, we ended up having months later with it to just listen.
Yeah.
And we were like, I think it wants to be like this. It feels kind of good. So we kept recording after that, and I think we did a little more intentional composition after that called the Duet on Ocean Floor.
Duet on Ocean Floor, yeah.
I remember you put me in the hot seat a little bit. You're like, well, I guess let's whatever you want to do. Why don't you write a song? And I remember thinking like the way I typically write piano songs is always by myself.
Right.
And I fiddle around, and sometimes you find things you really vibe, and sometimes you don't. But you were just like sitting there with like coffee. You're like, this is Peter Broderick sitting right next to me. It's like I'm a little self-conscious trying to find, and I had trouble finding something that I felt the Bob was in it,
Yeah, I
went a few directions, and I was like, no, not that, maybe not this. And you had a guitar, and you were like trying to like follow along. But I was like,
was it the guitar or the violin?
Violin. You're right. Violin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you recorded that in real time because you're sitting right there. So I mean, the violin's coming through. We're coming through all the mics, kind of thing.
Yeah.
We couldn't really edit it much.
There's actually a bit of footage of that process, actually. So I don't know.
I have Rada grabbed my phone at times and took footage, and I'm hoping to put together a little 5 to 10 minute mini doc.
Yeah, maybe by the time this is out,
that's my goal.
That's all done.
That's my goal. Yeah.
But yeah, that one's really special to me because it's just you on piano, just me on violin. There's no extra layers. Yep. It's all recorded live in one take.
No click tracks.
No click track. It really is just a simple composition, a duet for piano and violin that we composed. It's not improvised. We sat down and we wrote that together. I just think that's really special.
Yeah, that was definitely your intention, and I was like, let's do it. And I've said this before, but you're a fantastic violin player. You play everything well. You're a great singer, but you're a very, very good violin player. And so I think that's where the first song, it really shines because it clearly features the playing.
Sure.
Piano on one level, you play things.
Right.
There's nuance, but the intonation's in there. It's baked in.
Yeah.
So that's a sweet song. And I think by that point, we were at least in day 2, if not 3, probably 2.
Yeah, I can't remember if that was day 2
I remember
or 3.
writing that one in the morning, so maybe it was the the technically third day.
Maybe
I don't
so,
know.
yeah.
But then we did landscape,
Yeah.
and now we went a whole different direction. Because I think we were like, let's play some of this percussion that we have lying around. And you started making a beat.
Yeah.
And everybody
right.
asked me, so you can answer, what is the big 808 type drum sound that's on this record?
Yeah, this drum ended up sounding huge.
I think I just put an SM7B, just like this.
Right, that mic.
Really into the back of that tambourine thing.
And I've recorded that drum a few times, and it always sounds massive, but it's not a huge drum. It's like it's in Ireland. It's called a bowron.
10 inches, maybe 12.
I'd say 12 to maybe even 14 tops. Something like
It
that.
looks like almost a Native American drum.
Like a frame drum.
Frame drum.
Yeah.
Yeah. With a mallet.
Yeah, and I was hitting it with a mallet, but it just sounds huge. And you did a really good job treating and taming that sound.
I should put out there that our setup was like, we had plan A and we had to go with plan B or C because I had some gear that never made it that was in the lost luggage.
And that is lost
Never
forever?
was.
You
was
never
lost.
got it?
You imagine if I got it back years later?
Wow.
No, never got it. And I had, first off, an electrical whatever converter.
Yeah, power converter.
Yeah, and so the only one we had was my backup one. Thank God I had one.
Right.
But it was so shitty that it put a lot of this electrical buzz static into almost everything that went through a condenser mic on our recordings.
Right.
Which
It was
was
loud. It was loud.
It got louder every day.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that. By the
Yeah.
end, it was like really bad. I was like, we can't record anymore. This is getting so bad.
Yeah.
So we put that in the other. It came through the signal, not like it was loud in the room. It was a fan, but I mean, like,
Right.
it was actually an electrical like. it was
yeah.
in the
that's
recording.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
It was some kind of weird. I don't know. It's beyond my pay grade. But we also had borrowed some awesome equipment from Camden Studio, I believe.
Dublin.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the name of it.
I'm not sure.
I'm gonna look it up
actually.
while you're talking in a second because they were the sweetest people in the world and just
Awesome.
let us borrow this stuff.
That's great.
But they gave us this API channel strip, and day by day, every channel died except for the one. So we
it
had
was
one.
meant to be 4, right?
Yeah.
And then it was one channel.
Yeah, it's gonna
in
have like the
end.
piano. So we had one channel of API. We had one nice condenser mic you brought,
Yeah.
and a pretty nice piano.
And I have a friend who ended up loaning us a bit of gear as well.
A
Shout out
headphone
to
amp.
Simon O'Reilly.
The
Helped
best.
us out a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah, but
I
between
mean, even like basic like little adapters. Where like if we don't have this adapter, we can't both listen on headphones, kind of
Right,
thing. And it's
right.
like you'd think it's. And you had a violin. We had a guitar, acoustic nylon guitar, and percussion.
lots of percussion,
Of course, my Nord, but we barely use
keyboards
that.
and synthesizers. That's kind of the palette of the album: is piano, violin, bit of guitar. Our two voices
Voice.
sort of taking turns.
Occasional electronics, but
Yeah,
as electronics, not trying to be something else. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it was a real treat for me because you kind of stepped into the role of engineering and production in that sense, and that was a real treat for me because I'm used to doing a lot of things myself, and
And look
also,
up that studio where
yeah.
you're talking.
I often help. I'm often the one at the control seat helping other people record their music.
I wasn't sure, and I was like, I wasn't assuming. You know what I mean? But then when we got there, it's like, okay, I'll be the engineer.
I think we may have emailed about it, and you said you were happy to engineer. But of course, having never worked together, that's another thing. Is like, is that gonna gel?
Yeah.
Because the way people work with their software and how they set things up, sometimes it's really, it's everyone does it different.
Well, and you worked with your buddy Niels Fromm back in the day, and he did sort of like that. And
Yeah, he was
and
always
he's, I know, an engineering
absolutely
deep knowledge.
He's amazing at all that stuff, and he would always take the lead on those things when we worked together, and I learned a lot from working with him. The work that I've done engineering and recording other people, I learned a lot from my time with Nils. But working with you was sort of the first time since that period that I've had I've worked with someone that not only are they the engineer, but also creatively,
Collaborating together.
yeah, musically, and because oftentimes those are split up in music.
True.
You have the musicians, and then you have the people that capture the music.
Yeah.
But it's great to work with someone who's a great musician and a good engineer.
Oh, thanks.
It's a real treat.
It was a treat.
Because then it's all part of the creative process.
It gave us a level of freedom because anytime we had an idea, it's up to us. We're like, well, let's just let's try that, or maybe we can do it like this. There's no like mystery about it. So yeah, it was definitely Camden Recording Studios, and shout out to Niall there. He was just
cool.
He's been nothing but supportive and helpful. They have an awesome studio in Dublin.
Yeah, I'd love to check that out sometime.
So the landscape became this like psychedelic, I don't know what to call it, experimental acoustic rock thing almost. And
Track
then
4.
You wrote a poem and had Rada read it, and we recorded Rada.
Yeah. Well. So first of all, I think it's track 4. I was feeling by that stage like, let's get some rhythm in here, because it was all quite flowy, ambient, sort of,
contemporary classical-ish.
I wanted a bit of a beat, and so we started with that as the foundation of the song. But the poem was based on a conversation that we had with the three of us, because most of the days were spent you and I working, but then we would sit down with Rada and have these wonderful meals and talk all together.
She was in the room almost all day with us. So she'd go out, and she was looking for holy wells in the area. She had a map of, and she has Irish blood, but she was with us a lot in the room.
Yeah, and her presence for me was definitely there, a part of the whole thing, and I was just enjoying getting to know the both of you in the moments when we weren't working overtly on the music. And there was a conversation we had one night. It was about I was talking about Ireland and how it used to be covered in trees, and
like Iceland.
Was Iceland?
That's what I hear. Okay. Yeah, that they used them all.
And I'm not like a historian, so please take all this with a pinch of salt. But from my understanding, those trees, like at one stage, the British Empire sort of used Ireland as a resource farm, basically.
You don't say.
Yeah. But I think a lot of those trees were cut down and taken with very little to no regard of what impact that has on the landscape and the ecology of the place.
Yeah.
And used for building king's ships and all this kind of thing. So, but if you go to Ireland now, there's not a lot of trees. It's mostly pasture, and it's rugged, some of the land, like especially if you go out west of Galway, there's this region called Connemara that's known for being really rugged land that's not really super farmable, just rough land. So I was talking about how sometimes I feel like the landscape is like, it almost feels like someone who got their hair shaved, and they're like, oh.
I know nothing about that. You're looking at right here. This is the British taking all of my trees. This
you got a few trees left up there.
This is what we've replanted, and yeah.
Right. But like, I sort of wondered if does the land feel almost like a little bit embarrassed and naked, but also just traumatized a bit in a way. And so we were talking about this, and I was sort of expressing all this concern for this situation. And then Rada said something like, I asked her what she thought of all that, and she said, well, I think that the landscape is always changing, and so it kind of just opened up to a bigger picture of like, of course, yeah, it might be like that now, but it's going to change again. It's going to keep changing.
Yeah.
And this thing that I was zoning in on as a sort of problem, which it is a bit problematic in some sense, that the landscape may be devastated or whatever in a certain way. But she zoomed out in a bigger picture and just talked about, of course, a landscape is always going to change. It's never staying the same.
Yeah.
And it's always going to change in some way or another. If it's not humans altering it, it's
right.
It's always
the
altering.
nature of the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that really I just loved that. And so that was the sort of starting point for the poem. And then I thought it made sense to have her read it being there, the third person in the house with us as we work. She's got a beautiful speaking voice, and she was well up for it. So
she was up for it. Yeah, we recorded, and I think we told her at first it was a tiny bit stilted, and we said, just pretend you're reading a bedtime story to Benji, your son. And then it got
that
a
was
little more
helpful advice.
Intimate in a sense. Well, that was lovely. Lovely. And I remember when we took our one day off or half a day off and went on a hike when the sun came out one day. That was later though, right? A couple days later.
That was, I think, kind of midway into the trip.
Well, let's just basically, we had planned we should probably get out on land. It was pretty rough weather most of the time. We were there. And then one day, all of a sudden it was like sunny and brilliant.
Yeah, and the amazing thing was we had planned to take that as our day off anyway. And I had this feeling that we would get some nice weather that day. I never look at the weather.
I do.
Especially in Ireland, because the weather changes. It changes so quickly there, and it's, in my experience, if you look at it, it's rarely right what the forecast is. So,
well, you love to forage.
Yeah, I like to get out.
We were eating all this wonderful food, and a lot of it you had foraged, and sort of like garlics that you had dried and crushed and made, and greens and local. It was high-end food we were eating.
Yeah,
and you had foraged some local mushrooms.
Yes,
that were more or less from the area, right? I mean,
yeah, they were. Those were foraged up in Galway, but
same bay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we were microdosing on these little tiny dried mushrooms most days. Not every day, but most days, intentionally, to help with the process. And that day, we're like, maybe we'll take a little more.
Yeah.
And we just walked out of the house because we're on the Burren. We didn't have to drive anywhere. We walked out of the house and just started walking up the hill. And it quickly becomes just a trail. You're just on the bare rock, and we're like kind of aiming for the top.
Yeah.
And starting to drop into the space, and the veils are starting to, and we're having some interesting conversations. I was a little cranky, and I started to open up a bit. Remember that moment where I was lording over you on the rock, trying to explain to you how I'm trying to let go of control or something? You're like, just look at you. And I was on a rock pointing down at you, like 10 feet up. Yeah. You were like,
I started laughing.
See what's happening here?
I started laughing.
I did too. After you pointed, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? But we kept walking. And why don't you describe what happened after we kept going up the hill?
Well, we sort of hit a series of false peaks where we would walk up to the top of what we thought was the peak, and of course you get there and it's like, oh no, there's another one, and it just kind of kept going, and we were just wandering and stopping every once in a while. We would, at one stage, I remember just sitting and laying on some of those rocks in the sun. But there was one distinct moment where actually, Rhoda started to take the lead because she could see we were both just like a little bit meandering, and
weren't covering a lot of ground.
Yeah. So she started to take the lead, and she kind of led us straight. At one point, we just dropped straight into this little grove. Would you call it a grove? A little flat little.
Yeah, like almost like a ledge that was like 100 feet by 200 feet or something.
Yeah, it was a flat little area.
You can't see it from other areas.
And there was this beautiful, beautiful old hawthorn tree. Must be really ancient tree because it's really big for a hawthorn. It was really big.
Mm-hmm. And it was in almost like a little depression that was just covered in like 1 foot thick green moss.
Yeah.
And because it was sunny, it was a little dry. Like pillows.
Yeah.
Everywhere to just lie or sit on a
natural pillows. It was fluffy moss pillows.
And it was clear that this zone has been zoned and used and chilled in for perhaps millennia.
That's what it felt like.
It felt like, oh, this is the only spot around here to chill.
I mean, you got to remember the whole surrounding landscape is barren stone.
And it was windy. And this spot was not because the wind went over you.
There just was like this little nook where it was like dropping into an oasis of calm. Mm-hmm. And we all just kind of naturally just like plopped ourselves down under this tree without any discussion, really. I just remember walking up to that tree, and it was just such an inviting spot,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we plopped ourselves down there, and we ended up spending most of the rest of the afternoon just.
That became, we were supposed to come here.
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
I
yeah.
remember two significant happenings in that spot, and one afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
One was I was just lying down in this spot. Rada told me to like lie in this spot where you could put your whole body down and kind of you fit into the rocks and the moss. And I had this wild experience of dying and being absorbed into the earth. But it was one of those moments where you're like, is this actually like this whole life has been like a purgatory so I can accept this moment kind of thing? Like I'm finally dying.
Whoa.
It was deep, but beautiful, but deep. Like, and then I realized that I thought this was a place that was like a graveyard, but in a really holy way.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a place that things compost.
Whoa.
So I had that experience. And then you were over under the tree on a rock, and where I was like, we were like, you should lie down.
Uh-huh.
Can I tell this story?
Yeah, please.
And you were reticent. And we're like, why? And just on the face of it, you're like, there's spiders. I don't want a spider to run up my shirt. So
I've always
I don't
had
want
a fear
that
of
either.
spiders.
Me too.
Yeah.
So I was like, I get that. But Rada's, of course, a somatic therapist. She's like, well, tell me more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And we start going through the layers of you just talking about it. And then it goes down the layers to about how in your own lineage, members of your family having heart issues who have died.
Yeah, it's a serious issue.
And they've all been like eventually near the age that you're at.
35.
Yes. And that's where, so we're like, I hear this. And then we go down the layers of almost how like it's about heart opening in a way.
Yeah.
Because it's a pain.
Yeah.
It's literally about your heart, but also a pain in your heart, and how the spider wisdom was bringing it to the surface.
Not only that, but realizing that all this discussion was happening under the hawthorn tree, and the hawthorn is revered as one of the greatest natural medicines for the heart.
I mean,
gotta just
it was
get the chills
so
thinking
beautiful.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was and I think she was trying to work you to the point of sort of a kind of release. And I remember you were like, sure, no big deal. And we're like, okay, say it. And you couldn't say it.
Well, she wanted me to say something like that
you deserve.
That I'm deserving of love. Like something really basic like that.
You were like, of course, well, I'm not going to totally, you would hedge. Yeah. And we're like, well, just take it. No one's here. Just go for it.
Yeah.
And it was about the heart.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like the spider was the gateway into self-love ultimately, and fully open through the heart to the present moment in the recognition of mortality.
Yeah, it was
so beautiful.
It was a profound moment for sure. And made even more profound for me because sitting under this hawthorn tree for a while, sometimes you can get mixed up like, am I projecting onto this tree? Like, I can't help but wonder that sort of thing. Like, if I feel a certain sort of magical kind of presence, like, is this my own projection, or is this the nature of this place? And at one stage, I got up and sort of left you guys to be there alone for a little bit, and I just sort of had a little walk around, and I ended up in this other, like, kind of a little flat spot, and there was another big hawthorn tree. So I was like,
you cheated on our hawthorn tree.
But I walked up to it feeling like, like full of awe and love and wonder. But as I approached this tree, I got this distinct vibe of like, don't come near me.
Ooh,
and I was
girlfriend.
Like, yeah. And then I looked at the tree, and it was like the angles at which the branches had grown, they were just a bit more like, kind of like rough and like, and I was shocked at like, then I realized I hadn't been projecting onto that other tree because it had such a different feeling, and I had expected this other one to like feel similar.
Yeah.
But I came to see it in that moment, whatever state I was in, it felt to me like kind of like an old separated couple, and like this was a grumpy old man that just wanted to be
still
left
bitter.
alone,
yeah.
and just still bitter. And here was the the beautiful grandma,
feminine,
who just was there, open, loving for anybody who wanted to stop by and say hello.
Wow. And how have you reflected on that experience, or how has it evolved? It's been now, what, 8 months or 6 months, or it's been a while.
Yeah.
Has it come up again, or has it bit more in the unconscious?
It's come up. It's definitely come up. I have moments where I sort of my mind drifts back to that day and that experience. But it's usually just quite. I don't know. I just felt like something was really absorbed or downloaded.
That's what that whole place was
day.
about.
Yeah, that actually I didn't even have to do much afterwards. It just sort of arrived suddenly and bam, got it sort of and everything since then has been really simple, felt really simple to me, like looking back at that place and that time. I just feel like full of gratitude for that, having had such a beautiful, magical experience. It was really
You're making me remember that like the message for me was similar. It was about dropping stories, and it allowed me to leave my stories there into the. And I remember, and then my retrospect was like, oh, what died wasn't me; it was the old stories of me.
Wow,
and that was. I'm totally remembering. The gift is so alive right now. I was like, that's what it was all about. And that's something I feel like I'm in a cycle of right now in my life. It's like, oh, right. It's reminding me, it's like the pain sometimes can come from trying to push stories that actually are either dead or dying.
Yeah.
It's like, it just is what it is. It's like there's a new story.
Yep.
And it's an invitation to create that in a lot of ways. But so we walked down the hill feeling just, wow.
Yeah.
And you had this song that was coming to you. We didn't record it till a few days later, but it was the Hawthorn song.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump ahead just because it relates.
We might as well.
An unusual track. This was most definitely your vision.
Right.
Because when you came to me and like, I got it, it's an a cappella song. I was like, I remember thinking in my head, oh no, like, but we got to record it. And I was like, whatever Peter wants, let's do it. I was a yes. My attitude that week was, yes, let's try it.
Right.
Let's try it.
Right.
And we did it. And you were very clear, like, this is how it's going to go. This is how we're going to do it. It's in a round. It's like, okay, one microphone, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, I have to preface that by saying I had just finished or was finishing reading the whole Tolkien Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit for the first time. I never read any of that stuff as a kid, and for some reason I never was interested in or thought it would be my cup of tea, but found my way into it just in the last year prior to that, and ended up diving deeply and just getting so much out of those books. And then when we were there in Clare, no, it was not till you guys left that I found out that Tolkien himself used to spend a lot of time in County Clare in Ireland. Really? And
that makes sense.
The idea for Gollum was first came to him. This is what I heard. Probably there's lots of places that claim Tolkien got his ideas from this place, but what I was told is that the idea for Gollum he got it in one of those caves in County Clare.
Wow.
So, but that I didn't learn until after you left. But I was in this Tolkien world in my mind, you know, and these with the hobbits traveling, and they are always singing songs, you know, and the songs are the songs are a huge part of the book. They'll like every chapter, once or twice, they'll break into song.
Yeah.
And they kind of have a bit of a formula as well. Like there's usually a lot of rhyme, and there's a sort of whimsical nature to a lot of them. And so for me, the Hawthorn song arrived as something like that.
Okay.
You know, I was imagining it as one of these songs you sing journeying together by foot with, you know,
it sounds like
friends.
A drinking song to me for hobbits.
Totally.
And we recorded it, and I do remember it was basically 3 rounds singing against each other, and then it still felt like, where does this go?
Yep.
And I think you described, like, what if it kind of goes into a chaotic sea of reverb or something like that?
Yeah, or I wanted the whole thing to sound like it exploded in the end, or just like...
Yeah, and I was like, oh, I think we can do that.
Yeah, and you just like... there we go.
Explosion.
Sonic explosion.
And then it's like, oh, that's so psychedelic now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a total... I think it's one of Rada's favorites. Sure, I like that track too.
That's cool.
And it definitely rounds out the listening experience in a way you definitely would not expect.
Yeah,
But we didn't record that till a few days later.
For sure. That was towards the end. That was...
Because we did middle after
Well,
Landscape.
we're skipping one.
Oh.
After Landscape came a piece we call Journey to the Holy Well, which also is accompanied by a nice story.
Yeah, the two parts of that is in Radha's explorations to find holy wells. These are ancient Middle Ages wells that are springs. And she was going around to all of them, but one of them was literally across the street, right outside the front door.
Yep.
And on this farmland. And so we would go over there and get our water to drink because it was just this amazing.
And we were all enamored with this water.
You go down, you went through these trees and then down this pit about 10 feet, and they were just coming out of the ground.
Bubbling out, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a recording of that source a couple times.
Yeah, I went down there and recorded it. It sounds a little like urination, but it does. It's a holy
bit of
well.
A drip, drip.
It's a big difference.
Yeah. Is it?
So I think we wanted to do another sort of intentional piece, and we recorded it with guitar and piano, and both thought it was a little straight ahead, and it went on to like, maybe. And then you were going to bury it, and I was like, let me try something, and I basically just baked it like a cassette in the hot sun.
Yeah.
And it went lo-fi with it.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh, it's more just vibe. It's not so much about what we played. It just makes it a little like vibe, interlude-y
Absolutely.
vibe.
And we started to see it more as an interlude in context of these pieces of music that were had a bit more depth or demanded a bit more
like
attention.
The next one, which was epic.
Yes.
The middle.
In the middle.
How do you... that one, boy, did it take a journey. I guess it was piano it started as? I don't remember. I mean...
Yeah, I mean, instrumentally, yeah. But I think I had a concept of... at least I had woken up in the middle. It was in the middle of our time there. So if we had a week, it was the fourth day. And we had been having such a wonderful time that getting to the middle filled me with a sort of trepidation, knowing that, well, after this, we're going towards the end. And so I just started thinking about that concept and verbalizing it to you over breakfast and coffee, and so we started to throw back and forth we were just riffing on this idea of in the middle, and you threw out something like, the sandwich filling.
I did not.
Did you not throw that? Was that me?
It had to have been you.
I thought that one, no, maybe the one that was you was holding hands with beginning and end. That sounds more like you.
That sounds more like what I would say. Sandwich filling definitely sounds like Peter Broderick.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that we managed to write songs with lyrics and not be exactly sure who wrote what at times.
That's true, except for the ones like Hawthorn or Burren.
You sound more sure than I do in this instance.
Well, because anyway,
But that was the concept for me, is this feeling of being in the middle, and what do you do with that? And so we just sort of riffed on that for a while, and then...
So I think it was like a piano piece. It might have had some atmospherics of violin or something. And then I believe you sang like the verses.
We recorded live together, actually. It
was another improvisational piece.
No, I sang while you played piano.
Really?
Remember, I was in the hallway bit that led into the back bedroom there. We stuck me in there, and it started as piano and vocals.
Well, I just remember, and then you probably put violin on it, and then still it had lots of space, and we're like, what are we going to do with it? Where does this want to go?
Yeah, we knew that we wanted something to happen in the middle. In the middle.
That's right. We're like, could somebody make something happen in the middle of this song?
This gets really meta because we're talking about the middle, and then it's in the middle of the record, but in the middle of the song, something special happens.
Well, I've never thought about what that means for the record, what happened was, I don't remember whose idea it was, but it's like, what if we tried an electronic 4 on the floor? And we're like, do we want to go there? Because so far it's been totally acoustic, everything. Like your big frame drum, like everything. And we're just like, again, freedom, try it. Let's just see what happens. So I remember throwing the kick on, and we just started going there, and we're like, this is really fun. And in some ways, it turned into what you hear, which is it goes into full techno zone. And gets very intense and
cathartic,
thick.
Almost.
And blooms, and it's a long, maybe 3 or 4 minute jam.
Just that middle section, I think the whole song is 7 or 8 minutes.
It's by far the loudest point on the record, It's just an interesting turning point, an apex of sorts for the week and the journey in the record itself. Yeah. And totally new sonics come in.
Yes, that whole electronic palette
And very thick, distorted violins,
Yeah.
crazy vocals.
Yep.
It was by far the most complicated mix of the record.
Yeah. Yeah, you worked on that one a lot.
Yeah, it broke my computers. I mean, there's so much automation going on. It was just like,
Yeah.
I struggled. Yeah. I like how it turned out, but it was very, very complex because also you're trying to create a bridge from where we started, which was lush, spacious, atmospheric piano, vocal, violin.
Yeah. Yeah, I just love
It's a banger.
I love eclectic mixtures of things. I love to start one place and then go somewhere else and then go somewhere else. That's kind of what I've always done.
It's cool.
But I don't think I expected that it would go there. I think that must have been your idea to try that. But I fully embraced it as soon as I heard it.
Yeah. So if that happened, I kind of feel like our walk was after that. And then the track after that, because again, we did these in order. So now we've been through like contemporary classical and some folky, and then we moved into like the landscapes or psychedelic, and then we went back a bit, and then we went into this middle thing, and now we're probably thinking, all right, anything's fair game.
Yeah, I think at that stage the middle song was so intense to work on and like figuring out how that all puzzled together.
Yeah.
We just wanted to get back to where we started, which was just improvising together. So the two pieces that follow it are more of that nature.
What's after that?
It's Glade.
Oh yeah, that was just more ambient. And I think I was like, let me try singing in a free-form way on top of your... and there was that wonderful chime on the front porch.
Yes.
And I thought I'd love to make a song with that as the background.
Yes.
It was in G, I think.
It was close to G.
Close.
It was one of the most
G adjacent. It was a G ally.
One of the most beautiful wind chimes you've ever heard. Like the tone of it was so.
I mean, what you
soothing.
hear in there is it.
That's it.
With some delay, I think, on it, but
but that's the sound of the thing.
That's it.
But it wasn't quite in tune with like the piano, so I had to tune my violin down
and just
to
sing
match
on it.
to match it.
Right.
And so there's a bit of violin along with it, and then you sang along.
And the water,
with that.
I believe,
and
right?
there's
The
more of
holy
the
well.
water. Yeah.
And then we did another improvisation that was Morning Rada?
No, it's Burgeoning.
Burgeoning
came after that.
And that was a little more like, what if we did one together and it had a little more like drive?
A bit more of a pulse, piano and
which
violin.
Which was challenging.
I
remember to really listen on the headphones because, again, we didn't have a click track or anything. We had to really like focus.
Yeah.
I like that one. I thought that was super fun.
I love that one too. I really love how it turned out. And then
that was a one taker. Like a lot of them were like
except that I had the idea to embellish it a bit after the fact with the extra layers of strings.
I think you did some of that there. Like for instance, on the middle, you stayed up super late recording like 20 some strings to make the orchestra sound. With your one violin, which sounds amazing.
Yeah, I wanted that song to have this lush, like cinematic
landscape too. You did that.
Yeah,
that kind of Bollywood strings. Yeah,
but the middle song was a bit longer of a string arrangement, and I had it in my head. I knew I needed to do it. I stayed up until 4 a.m.
It was worth it.
Doing
I went to bed. It's like this is you, man. I don't know. This is gonna be intense.
But it's an important piece of the song for me.
Big time.
I wanted that one to sound devastating. Actually, that was the word in my mind. Like just,
dun, dun.
Really lush and sort of overcoming. Sort of like washing over you in a big wave.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so after the middle was those two more improvisational pieces, Glade and Burgeoning. And then
glade was when we were walking down from the Hawthorn tree. We were walking through this glade of trees.
Yep.
And so I was just singing the glade, meandering through the grass. I mean, that's where it came from.
Yeah,
it was
totally.
just another like passage from the Burren in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the wind chime
downhill,
from the front
going
door.
Downhill like the water back to our house. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
By the way, I'm wearing the socks that I had to buy in Ireland because I had no clothes. In honor. Yeah.
Look at that.
So after Burgeoning, we're almost done here.
Okay, so then it was Friday, and it was Good Friday.
Uh-huh.
We were just coming up on
Hawthorn.
Easter, and I I said to you, what if we work with the theme of resurrection?
Okay.
It being Good Friday.
Right.
And I think we had already had a song where I took the vocal lead with the Burren.
Lyrically too.
Yeah, and we had done the middle where we're both singing together, which we kind of collaborated on the lyrics. So this one, it was like we decided to have you be the sort of main lyricist and singer of the song.
Yeah, I was nervous again, but I was like, all right, if you insist. But we started that one with another little beat, and you were playing guitar riffs, and you accidentally played like a major versus minor. And I remember we both were like, that's cool.
Yeah, totally.
And that became the hook.
Absolutely.
Of the track.
Happy accident.
So we did that, and you made some little triplet guitar things and a little simple. By the way, we had no bass guitar in the house, so all we had was this little synthesizers. So there's not much actual bass guitar, but when there is, that's what it is pretty much.
Yeah, there's no bass guitar at all, but just any little bass is a synthesizer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think lyrically I was riffing on that. You kind of put that idea, here's a theme.
Yeah.
And I just sat there with my little microphone and recorded some lyrics.
Yeah, Resurrect Inside, which I
And
love. I love that
I love
one.
that. The guitar, I don't get to work with the guitar much. So for me, it's just fun to sing on guitar and do songs with guitar. And I love nylon guitar a lot.
Yeah, and I had just gotten that nylon guitar secondhand like a week or two prior to that thing. So it was my first place to use it.
I love that we kind of got this nice crunchy, semi-crunchy, like forward analog sound on it that I like. It's very forward and like it's not like soft and like you'd think of as
right.
Right. It's got
It's quite punchy actually, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that makes it the whole song.
Mm-hmm.
The feeling of it. Oh, and the claps.
The claps and all the percussion.
Up.
Yeah. But that one to me feels like the closest we got to like a pop song that you could hear on the radio. You know, it's like
What's the radio?
You know, it's this thing that used to exist before podcasting.
I read about it though. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like it's under 4 minutes. It's sort of like semi upbeat in comparison with the others. It's super upbeat.
It's got 3 choruses.
Yeah.
It's got a bridge.
Yeah.
It's more traditional than that. It was fun, and then probably Hawthorn was recorded at night that night.
No, Morning Rada. I think we must finish Resurrect Inside.
That one came pretty cohesively, I think.
Yeah. And then morning
Rada. That's because you had to go away for a day. And when you came back, you spent the night away. You came back, and as I had already set up ready to go.
Yeah, I got there early in the morning.
Yeah.
And you were already ready to go.
And I hit record, and Rada was coming in, and it's just what you said. You know, and I was like, hey, what's going on?
I was like, oh, I'm sorry if I woke you when I came in, you know, and she's like, no, and she's like,
great to
we're
see
glad
you
you're
again.
back. We missed you.
And I'm trying to shut you both up, and I'm like, it's a morning jam for Rada. Pick up your instruments.
Yeah, so that is left in the record, which is really precious.
We found it accidentally later, like, listen to that.
Yeah.
So that's why it's called that. And she lay on the couch. We're like, this is your morning jam.
Yep. That's it. Yeah, she was so receptive and supportive of all that we were doing there, and also helping to like cook and stuff, and you know, see that we got
keep the vibes.
Fed. Yeah, keep the vibes.
There was a fireplace right there, in the main room. Where, so we had the main room where like our instruments were, and then the sunroom adjacent was like the the computers and stuff.
Yeah.
And we lit the fire every morning, or I did.
Yep.
Where I made coffee, and it was a wonderful ritual. And so she liked to be there because of the warmth.
Yep.
And we did record the fireplace,
Yep.
which is that's what you hear in landscape. Is that?
Yes.
That's the fireplace.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that song that we ended up calling Morning Rada was kind of back towards where we had started with the piano and the violin and the more somber, melancholic.
The
territory.
first song we did to me was like the biggest East Forest heart opener. Like I was like on cloud 9. So I feel like trying to go back there with you.
Yeah.
And I kept being like, let's do
that
another
contemplative piano and violin.
Yeah, that beautiful violin, ethereal stuff.
Yeah, is that maybe more what you might have pictured, what we might have done before going into it?
I think I was hoping.
Yeah.
because I know, well, we both have very diverse sounds,
Yeah.
you especially. So I was also like, I don't know. I really don't. And I was totally open to like whatever wants to be. It's totally awesome.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have to be honest, when the very first notes we played, I instantly was like, oh my God, this is what I've always wanted to play with this guy, you know? And like, here it is just blossoming.
Yeah.
And the live stream we did last weekend had a lot of that vibe. And so I was, I think I said after you know, this ceremony space really suits you because it allows you to lean into that space and not feel like, oh, I have to, it's just like, no, just
now I have to make a pop song.
Do more
and now I have
more.
to make it.
And it's such a dude, there's that improvisation you did in the middle of that ceremony that was the live stream we recorded that was just stunning. Because you had the freedom to play as long as you wanted. Like it was, I told you before, the longer the better.
Yep.
And to say like, as long as it's from the heart and it, like, so those two things being your like guideposts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fucking A, dude. So good.
Yeah. I had a great time doing that. It felt amazing. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you want to
We'll wrap it up? There's two more songs.
Yeah, there's two more
Hawthorn
songs.
we talked about.
Yeah. After the Morning Rada song came the Hawthorn song, the sort of Hobbit drinking song, if you will.
Exploding into psychedelic consciousness.
Yes. It explodes in the end. And then after that, the last piece was really just, we recorded it the morning we were leaving.
And I want to squeeze out one more improv.
And I wasn't even sure if we had time, but then when we did it, I was like, because also the Hawthorn piece felt like it could be the end.
Yeah.
But then once we recorded the last piece, which we call Becoming.
Shout out to Bio Akamalafe.
Nice.
Yeah.
Once we recorded that, I was like, oh yeah, of course it's got to wrap up this way. It sort of bookends it as well, you know, as to how we started with piano and violin and just texture.
Yeah. But I do remember like that electrical converter was dying. And so like there was so much noise coming through and there's some kind of like breakdown of the piano where it's like clicking and clanking. So I just remember it was barely usable. So I just filtered out as much of that as I could. And we had to go kind of lo-fi with it because we had to do so much. But it ended up turning kind of cloud-like and light.
Ethereal kind of.
And I actually
feeling.
liked that it forced us, instead of in a hi-fi direction, like the first track.
Yeah.
It was kind of cool in that way. It's almost like you're going into the clouds.
That's what it feels like. It's a bit of a send-off and a very gentle one, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was it. And then we left, and I think we were both a little stun-gunned afterwards. Like, I can't believe that week just happened. Just the enjoyment of being out, just to create. What a privilege, just to be able to create like that.
Totally.
All day, every day, and have it feel so just like nature playing a huge part in its creation. Like the sense of place.
Yeah. Yeah, we were really, really diving into the feeling of the place for sure. And I don't know if we could have not done that if we wanted to. You know, it was just speaking to us and through us, to us and through us. But yeah, it might be worth talking a little bit about what happened afterwards. And because, you know, we had that 1 week together. It was the first time we ever met in person. Yeah. We'd done a couple of these chats long distance.
We did the two podcasts that people who I say go back and hear. They're great.
Yeah, you can hear them. Yeah. But we had that amazing week together. We both just had a wonderful time. And then we weren't exactly sure because the music was all there, but we needed to put the final touches on it.
Yeah.
Mixing and just deciding, do we want to keep everything? So
it needed to be mixed. I mean, it sounded great, but it did need to be mixed.
Yeah, so we weren't exactly sure what's the timeline going to be for that. How are we going to do it? And yeah, I think it's worth telling people because it could sound like all sunshine and roses if we're just like, yeah, we had a great time for a week and it's all amazing. But
it was hard work.
It was hard. Then we started sending emails back and forth and texts about.
Well, like, I was tagged with the duty of mixing it, and I also said I would mix it.
Right.
And in my mind, I did think like we could have this done in 3 weeks because I thought it was like we're pretty close.
Yeah. But you made another round of mixes, And when I first heard that, I felt my feeling.
I ruined it.
No.
I think words you used were devastated.
Oh, no.
And like alienated.
No, I didn't say devastated, did I?
You did say I'm alienated by these mixes. Anyway,
yeah.
you
Well,
felt strong emotions.
what I said was that it felt like something had happened where you had more time to get closer with it. But while that happened, something happened that made me feel more alienated from it.
Yes,
And
it wasn't as artfully put. It was in text.
Okay.
We should have just talked.
Yeah. No, we should have.
Yeah.
Because it was hard. Like, even though we'd had that amazing week together, we really hadn't spent much time together. And now we have another week under our belts, so we know each other even more.
Yes.
But at that time, 1 week isn't a huge foundation of a...
Well, we were very focused on one thing, too, when we were there.
So it just got a bit... It got hard, actually, to communicate long distance over how to finish it. And we did, and we had a couple conversations sort of trying to talk through the difficulty of it. But yeah, it just for whatever reason, it wasn't easy. And
well, part of it, as you said, was coming off the polarity of such a high.
Sure.
Inevitably, it's like, well, this isn't as fun. Sending
No.
emails back and forth with mixed notes, and I can't just vibe it and be like, oh, we're going to do this. We just do it together. It's more like you're trying to translate, and then my hands are on the knobs, essentially, thousands of miles away, and you're like, why doesn't it sound as good? I don't feel as special anymore.
Right.
And I'm trying to be like, hey, we'll get there.
Yeah.
This is the process. And
yeah, and
we took some time off.
We did. We ended up sort of having to put it on the side for a while.
Well, we did work on it, but then I had to work on my other record, and I kind of got like, I was like, I have to unfortunately finish that.
Yep, and I had some other things I needed to dive into as well, and so I'm just so grateful now that we've had the chance to meet again, and
well, you're here now because we wanted to finish the mix together.
We wanted to finish the mix together, and
I'm glad you did.
Yeah. And we finished it yesterday on the winter solstice.
We technically finished an hour ago, and we just uploaded it.
That's when we uploaded it.
We sat on it for a night, and we did finish on the winter solstice, and it felt wonderful and fitting. And because you were here, we're like, let's basically play again. That's why we did the live stream, just because we wanted to be in that wonderful creative space.
Yes.
And I'm glad we did that because it was so cool that John and Max could come help capture it on film.
Yeah.
As opposed to just audio.
That was special having them, was it 4 cameras?
4 cameras in like this little studio. We had shit everywhere.
Yeah.
We're all like a sea of cables we're tripping over.
I'm surprised no one tripped and fell.
We're pros, man. Yeah. So it's now mixed, and you're done. You're not going to leave here. We're talking about the future and say things need to be changed, and you're happy with it.
No, I'm not going to come back to you and say, long distance, can you go change
that
this?
One hi-hat, yeah.
No, it's done.
It sounds beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful creation. And I think I was saying to you earlier today, I think this record is one that, like a lot of my music, it asks for your attention, and the more you give it, and the more patience, like that's when it really starts to feed its gifts to you. There are tracks on it that grab you right away, and you're like, I get this, I know this, and I'm into it already because they have beats, and Landscape and Resurrect Inside, I think, are like that.
Yeah.
You just like, oh. But the others, it's like there's subtlety. And I love that we spend a lot of time on the nuance and the details because there's such depth in there from the simplicity and the spaciousness.
Yeah. I'm just feeling I want to say sorry if I was too intense with my notes from afar.
Dude, if anyone gets it, I get it. Believe me.
It's all from the passion of the music for me.
Dude, I seriously, I forgive you, and I'm very intense as an artist too. So if anything, I was like, I'm meeting my other. I mean, a lot of this felt like twin flames.
Yes,
it
was a bit like that. Yeah,
musically, it feels like that, and I was like, oh, we have some kind of connection on so many levels that that's maybe why I was frustrated because I felt I knew where it was going to get.
Yeah.
And I want to just be like to say, trust me. I understand. It's natural to kind of go a little. You have to find the edges. Okay,
Yeah.
that's not like that, not like
Yeah.
this, and then we're like this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know it always has that demoitis a bit, like, but it was awesome. And it's like,
Yeah.
but it needs to be fit, and we have to. It's going to get ugly for a second.
Do you know the composer Arvo Pärt?
Yes.
He's an Estonian composer, like really devastating. Talk about devastation. Like his music is devastating.
Yeah.
But so beautiful. But there's a documentary about him, and there's a scene that I always sticks in my mind because I ponder whether or not it's true. He's working with this orchestra to try and get this piece perfectly practiced so they can record it and sort of more or less have the definitive recorded version of this piece. And he's like the sweetest man, everyone who works with him loves him, but he's talking about the process at one point, and he's like, when we do this, when we go to record the music, I forget exactly how it says it, but the gist of it is we have to go all the way to hell and back. That's just the way
Out
it
of
is.
the gate.
And it's like I guess a part of me is like, well, of course it couldn't all just be easy. Like
it needed to find its edges too, the process.
Yeah.
To know that the full expression has happened in a sense. Like almost like if there was no conflict, it's like, oh, you're hiding something. You're not being vulnerable enough.
Yeah.
Because you were being vulnerable enough to say, like, I really care about, okay, this might hurt.
Yeah.
But I really care about that goddamn hi-hat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
I just can't help it, man.
Well, on one level, I'm like, thank you for caring.
Yeah.
It's
on the other level, shut the fuck up.
Well, look, I'll say that you did give good notes. And
they're very detailed.
Almost every note you gave, once I was into it, I was like, I agree with this. And I'm glad that we changed it, because sometimes I have a tendency to say, like, it's almost like laziness, which is like, it's fine. But then I would do it and I was like, no, he's right. That's needed to be changed. And I'm glad he pointed it out. You have good ears, and so.
I just know. I just have strong
the
opinions about
obsessiveness
this
is
stuff.
where I was like, you don't need to obsess about this. Like, that will happen, or it's not as big a deal as you're making, but we will address that.
Yeah. It all feels like a huge deal to me. Like, it's like when I'm in a project and I'm working on it, everything's so important.
Well, there was only one moment, we should point out, aside from the microdosing, we were sober.
Yeah.
Except
totally.
for one time where we smoked some weed.
Okay.
And it went south. Do you remember this?
No, I don't actually.
We smoked weed, and you immediately got extremely obsessed about some detail, and then you just left and said, "I need to go on a walk," and you just left.
Whoa!
Do you remember this? And then you came back. You're like, "Okay, I did some self work. I kind of lost my shit." I was like, "You definitely lost your shit," because it came out of nowhere. You just all of a sudden were like, we can't move on until we fix that thing.
Weed
I was
doesn't
like,
really agree with me anymore.
Well, we didn't smoke after that.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, that's probably for the best.
Yeah.
Now that you mention that, I do remember that. I had to go lay down outside at one stage because
You just left all of a sudden, and you were like, I need to go take care of my stuff, which I appreciated. You were like, I'm going to go deal with me.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. That was the first time I was like, oh. I was like,
yeah, I bet it was the weed.
100% was the weed, because it didn't happen otherwise.
Right. That's so weird, isn't
I
it?
definitely after that made a mental note, like, no weed.
Yeah.
It's
Great.
not helping us.
That's good. That's good. I appreciate that.
But dude, the story of this is just pure beauty. That's all I'm left with, in gratitude. So thank you.
Thank you.
I should point out that I was your fan. I still am your fan, but I was a fan of yours many, many years ago. So the fact that we're sitting here and have done all this is a treasure for me, and a triumph for me personally. And I wrote you an email telling you I was a fan when I was just starting out with East Forest.
Yep.
Saying you inspire me, thank you, and you wrote me back, which no one ever did,
right?
Because I had done this to others, and because of that, we were connected with your email. Because of that, I asked you to do a Ram Dass rework, and because of that, we did the podcast, and because of that, we did this.
Yeah, man.
So it's your own graciousness that allowed this to happen.
Yeah, just stay away from the weed and I should be all right.
Don't do drugs, kids. All right. Well, thank you, Peter.
Thank you,
and
man.
I hope everyone enjoys this record. Peter has a podcast as well That's super, super fun. It is called
One Song. It's called One Song. We
Highly
dive into one
produced now.
song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's super cool. And everything else will be in the show notes. We hope you enjoy the record. And anything else, Peter?
I think that's it. That's it. Bye, everybody.
Peace.
Oh, thanks, Peter. I mean, it's been such a journey, and I'm glad this album is now coming out this week. You know, when you make something, there's nothing more than you want to share it with all y'all. We just want to like connect the final dots, which is the listening experience and that full circle of creation to experiencing. So it's coming out, and we are overjoyed. The album is called Burren. You can get it wherever you listen to music. And on March 17th. And there's going to be an album a vinyl. The album's going to be on vinyl that you can pre-order soon. It's a really beautiful vinyl. I think we're going to do the first little few hundred of them is on this beautiful multicolored earth pressing. And then there'll be another pressing beyond that that's on nice weighted black vinyl for top fidelity. And it's got all the lyrics in there and all the original photography that Vision Kit did. We did this great shoot with Vision Kit in Boise on analog film, like medium format film, where we actually just stood there and they shot, and then we would move to create the motion or they used a prism for the album artwork is actually a prism that Matthew was just holding up against the camera as we just stood there. I mean, I think we only took like 8, 10, 12 images tops because it's film. You know, that thing we used to do back in the day? Anyway, this song that you're hearing in the background is called Landscape, and it features the voice of my beloved Marissa Rada-Wepner. Peter wrote a poem, as you heard about in our stories, and this is the one where she reads that. And this was about the landscape all around us in the Burren. But this one is fun because it has percussion, that we created this beat, that wonderful kind of 808 vibe that you hear on a lot of the songs from that Irish frame drum. But you can hear this without me talking over it and in full fidelity where you listen to music. And also over at eastforest.org, if you want to go to the Bandcamp, you can hear it in 24-bit if you want to get into the full audio fidelity thing. Please do, because all the gifts of fidelity are there for those who have the systems and desires to hear it. All right, my friends, let us know what you think about the record. Social media is a good way to do that. And you can always say hi at team@eastforest.org. Until next week, you keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit. But if you do it with grace.
One story ends and we turn the page. But just as one finishes, another begins. The universe can recycle as well. flow.